Hello and welcome to Talking Points, our weekly show where we round up all things Spurs. And what a week it has been. Gentlemen, how are we doing? We all right?
We say what a week, but this is happening every week now. So, like, if something doesn't happen, that's going to be like what a week soon, isn't it?
I know. I'm Sam Spurs for Life, and I'm joined by my resident guest as usual, Mike Hotspur Hustler, Darius 3K, and at the bottom we have the Spurs versus team. We have Danny, we have Stefan. Welcome, gentlemen. How are we doing?
Yeah, good, thanks.
I'm asking twice. I'm trying to see if I can get a positive out of you, but how can we be?
No.
It has been a week, it has been a season, it has been a few years, it's whatever you want to talk about. We've got some things to talk about. As the title of this goes, let's just get straight into it, eh? Let's not waste any time. So, first talking point. What a mess. Who is to blame at Spurs? Is it going to be the players? Is it going to be the board? Is it the manager? Is it a combination of all three? Is there aliens that have come down and done something else to make us what we are at this present time? It is a real quandary. I believe there's a lot going off at Spurs at the moment, which is not all positive. And as you can see from results, we aren't doing too well in that department either. But gentlemen, I'm going to come down to the guys at the bottom. Danny, I'm going to start with you. Tell me, you give me your overview of what is to blame at Spurs currently.
I mean, it's hard to kind of pinpoint one thing, isn't it? I mean, it's a combination of all three of those factors, I'd say. I think this season, if you had to put, the sole blame on someone, I would probably choose the manager, just because I think, he's made so many poor decisions. You've only got to look at the Sissoko substitution from the Man United game, where the whole fan base can see that is the wrong sub to make. We want to win the game. We don't want to sit back. We want to go on and win it. And we're taking off Lo Celso for Sissoko, and that was just a perfect example. I mean, that I feel like we'll look back at that sub in a few months' time, and that will be kind of symbolic of Mourinho's decline at Spurs. For me, he has to take most of the blame, at least this season. I think overall, you've got to look at the board. I think if you look at the last few seasons as a whole, then of course you've got to, you go way back to Pochettino and those 2 summer windows where we didn't sign anyone. But in terms of this season, I personally feel once we get rid of the manager, we'll start to see an uptick in form, and we'll start to feel positive again, hopefully.
There's a complete split in the fan base, as you guys are probably aware. There's a lot of people, Jose out. There's a lot of people saying it's not the manager. Doesn't matter who we have as a manager. It's not going to work. We need to do something else at the top. There's so many factors that could be brought up. I agree with what you're saying in terms of the manager. The manager hasn't made the best decisions in some games, and certainly the weekend there was a lot of blame that Jose should be attached to. He doesn't seem to want to take responsibility for anything. I've never heard him come out in any press conference and say, it's my fault. That's not a Jose thing. Is that his ego? Stefan, I'll come to you. What's your thoughts on the matter?
Well, I think there's a bit of an inclination at present for everyone to try and shift the blame onto somebody, to say, right, it's this person's fault, it's this person's fault. But I do genuinely think, and I'm not just to sound like a fence sitter, but it does feel like a combination of the three. And obviously you can't absolve the players. They're not performing at the moment. Some of them are not. They're not fit to wear the shirt, some of the kind of level of performance we're seeing. Jose's mistakes tactically, some of his defence-minded substitutions, as Danny was talking about, have been dreadful. I think his man management and the way he deals with squad players and confidence is some of the worst I've seen of any manager we've had at the club. But I do think that the buck does stop with Levy, and I think the major decisions, be it not backing Poch those sort of couple of years, sacking Poch, bringing in Jose, he's the man behind all of these decisions. And I think even though we can pinpoint so many different aspects that have gone wrong, and we can pick holes at so many different people, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years time, when we look back over this period and how close we got to being such a big team, I think when we look back at this period, it will be Levy's name that will get the most kind of vitriol and the most blame attached, because he is, I think, over the test of time, Levy is the one that we have to kind of think is not solely to blame, but the main reason, I think, for us not for this regression we've seen over the last 2 years.
Sure. So Enoch been 20 years at the club now. I guess a lot of people remember that those 90s days where they were really horrible days at Spurs. We currently now have one of the best infrastructures in terms of a stadium, training ground facilities, which has been brought about through Enoch and Daniel Levy. So it's not all bad in that sense. I think a lot of people are conflicted by the investment not being put into the playing stuff, but we may come on to that in a little while with regards to the scouting aspect. Jose, Darius, I know you're with Darius Jose, he might make a better substitution. Darius, what's your thoughts on the manager? What's your thoughts on the board? What's your thoughts on the players?
Again, I think I've got to agree with Stefan and in the fact that it really is a case of a combination of all. And I think you have to kind of look at it and think, what's going wrong now? What's going wrong in the midterm? What's going wrong in the long term? In the long term, you can't blame, obviously, Jose Mourinho because he hasn't been here for this long. So you have to look at, obviously, the board's mistakes. I think, obviously, the 2 windows is probably the biggest mistake. Not capitalizing on a 3rd and 2nd place finish is pretty criminal. You're seeing clubs that are even spending in COVID windows. And it's like, if we didn't spend anything during a normal window where we finished 3rd and 2nd consistently in the Champions League, it's a little bit unforgivable. So that I can't put any blame on anybody else but the board for that. But for me, I take a look at the football on the pitch. And I think me and Sam had a conversation earlier on the day, and we kind of were discussing what Poch was doing in terms of playing a strong enough team to compete in the domestic trophies and in domestic competitions. And he really didn't play strong teams at all in those competitions. And I think he quite easily could have won 1 or 2 domestic trophies had he wanted to put his all into those competitions. And like Sam said, I think he probably would still be in his job now had he won maybe just even 1 FA Cup or 1 Carabao Cup. So he had nothing to stand on, and inevitably that was why he lost his job. So it's difficult to look at Poch and not say, well, you're at a bit of fault for yourself for what happened at the end. But then again, you got us so far, you might have maybe overachieved, and now we're looking at Jose and thinking, are you meant to be hitting the levels that Poch was hitting? Are you meant to be doing better? Have we kind of expected too much from people? And I don't know. For me, I look at the squad and I think we've got probably top 5, 6 squads in the league. And Jose's meant to be top 3, 4 managers in the world. And if you combine that, I'm expecting a lot more. That's my issue. I'm expecting a lot more. And when I see people sort of scapegoat the downcomings of the squad because of the board, I kind of seems like a cop out. That doesn't seem like you're actually looking at the issues that's happening on the pitch. And like you said, Danny, and Stefan, there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of a quick upturn could happen. If you change the manager, you could see a quick upturn. And I think in these situations now, that's what you need. A quick upturn is the best thing you can kind of get. And you need to kind of ride the coattails on that. Look, we got lucky with the Poch appointment. He took us to heights that we didn't really think we could reach. And maybe you never know, with another manager, we could reach those heights. For me now, it doesn't look like Jose is going to reach those heights, and it doesn't look like he's going to get anywhere. So I don't see the point in giving him more of a chance, even if we win the Carabao. But again, that's another argument.
Are you more on the manager in terms of what's happening this season?
This season, it has to be, for me, it has to be the manager, because I think that the players that he got in the summer shows that the squad was good enough. He made, and you keep making, Danny and Stefan made points, he made so many decisions. It's not 1 or 2 where it's like that's a little bit suspect. It's constantly making these really, really naive and silly decisions that you wouldn't expect a manager of Jose's caliber to be making. And I just think it's unforgivable. I don't think we can be giving him those chances, because nobody would bring on Sissoko in a game like that when you're 1-1. If you're 2-3-1 up, you might make that decision, but I don't think any manager would bring on Moussa Sissoko at 1-1 against Man United. So it's those decisions that make me think I just don't really see how the board can be blamed for that. That's not their fault. It's not their fault he didn't play Joe Rodon in the Europa League.
A lot of the fan base though is saying that it doesn't matter who was in charge or who would be in charge of Spurs currently, even going back to when Poch was here and even before that, the manager could be, I don't know, Pep Guardiola. He's not going to be able to get Spurs to any more heights than we are currently. Are we overachieving as a team? Are we overachieving as a club, given that our history suggests that we are not one of the top teams? Obviously, we've only won 2 league titles in our history. Mike, I'll come to you. Are you on anybody's case in terms of the board, the players, or the manager?
No, I'm I hate saying this, and I hate using this reference, but I'm sitting on the fence with a lot of it, because regardless of what outcome we or Spurs take. So if take for example, if we sack Mourinho, what's the alternative? We get another manager in. The same players are still going to be at the club. And my thought process, well, if Poch and Jose didn't have the answer, what's the next what's to say the next manager is going to have those answers? Yeah, we might see an upturn in performance from the players, but in 12, 18 months time, we'll probably be back to square one, whereby we're having the same issues that Jose and Pochettino have had. So I honestly, for the first time in a long time, I really don't know what the answer is to anything. I mean, I like with regards to the board. I know the board have come under a lot of criticism, and it's fair criticism. But I look at what they're doing in the long term, and like the stadium, the training facilities, etc., and the infrastructure that they're putting in place to give us that foundation to put us on a global map to try and compete with the likes of your Man Uniteds and your Liverpools. And I think ENIC are trying to, or Levy is trying to be creative with trying to put us on the map, but. I'd say I think off the field, I think he's getting the things right. But people, and rightly so, I suppose, they're like, well, if you've got the money to spend off the field, why are you not spending it on the field? But how do you build the foundations? Surely you've got to start off the field to get the club to a position of being on the map to compete with the likes of Man United, Liverpool. But sure, it's going to affect us on the field, because that might not provide us with the fees that we need to compete on the transfers and the wages, etc. So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation, a chicken and egg scenario.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, before we moved on, I just wanted to just read this comment out here from Wayne. Good evening, Wayne. The board, they've shown no interest in investing properly despite being one of the 10 richest clubs in the world. The board are poor and clueless. They set the standards. Is that fair? Is that a fair summation of the board? Does anybody want to take that up?
Well, I'll just say very quickly, you take where Tottenham were under Alan Sugar back in the 90s. The club we was in administration. We were going to go down the same route as Wimbledon if it hadn't been for ENIC. And where we were there to where we are now, I don't think you can say the board are clueless. I mean, Levy's got a master's in economics, so he's a businessman. He knows what he's doing in that sense. Sure. It's the on-field stuff. I think people just need to take a bigger look at the bigger picture, maybe, and just understand where we are as a club. I know we all want success overnight, but Rome wasn't built in a day.
So I'll come to you, Stefan. Is it a case that the ENIC group are businessmen through and through, and are looking to make profit out of Spurs?
Yeah, so I think the thing is, ultimately, they're an investment company. So obviously their aim is going to be different to what the fans are, because Levy's got to go to Joe Lewis at the end of every year and present profits. And all we care about is success on the pitch. All we care about is trophies. And that doesn't necessarily equate to how the sort of the spreadsheets are looking at the end of the year. So I do think that is Levy's main priority, but I don't think that necessarily means he's not trying to succeed on the pitch as well. I don't think he's going, so he's not tunnel vision, like, right, I just want to purely make money. I don't care about Spurs on the pitch, especially because really the two go hand in hand, because the better we do, the more money he makes. But I do think, though, that there is a ceiling to Levy's kind of ownership here, which is that we got so close to being such a big team. We were, I mean, that those years under Poch, we got to the Champions League final, those 3 successive top 3 finishes. It just felt for the first time, I'm sure, in many of our lives, that we were finally in that big league. We'd finally got broken through that kind of that ceiling. We were going to become one of the biggest teams in the world. And to do nothing for those 2 years, I still can't shake that. I still think that is an unforgivable act to not take us to that next level. So you're right, Mike, in the sense that Levy he's built a fantastic stadium. We're in no danger ever of being in any financial trouble. He's created a stable foundation and runs this club very efficiently and very well. But I think we've seen one opportunity where we almost went to that next level and he didn't do it. And for me, that shows that he can only take us so far, which I think is why he'll do a good job for us and he'll do better than Sugar did for us. But is he going to be the man to take us to that next step? And I can't hand on heart say he will.
Sure. I'll come to you just, Daniel, just quick before we move on to the next. Do you think we're overachieving? Because a lot of people are saying that, you know, Spurs, the board have spent money in terms of, like I say, the infrastructure, and because historically we're not at the likes or at the same level as the likes of Liverpool, your Man Uniteds, even your Cities and Chelsea's in recent times. Are we overachieving as a club? Are our expectations too high?
Maybe. I mean, obviously, Poch set the bar so high because we, as Stefan said, we came so close, you know, finishing second, and we were in that so-called title race with Leicester. But I wouldn't say we're overachieving in the sense that of the squad. You know, in terms of the quality in our team, you know, we should be well up there. You know, we you know, I genuinely thought after that summer window, I thought we had a shot of winning the whole thing, and especially during that period where, you know, obviously around December we were unbeaten for a few games and we were top of the league, and you're thinking, you know, we could go the whole way here. I'd say we're good enough to be top 6, 100%. You know, the squad is easily good enough for top 6. In terms of how the fans look at it, yeah, I think maybe we are our expectations are a tad too high, simply because of, you know, how we've been the last 10 years. And a lot of the younger fans won't remember the 90s. They won't remember how poor we were. You know?
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, there was that season under Christian Groves, we almost got relegated. You know, like these were bad times. So I think people need to put things into perspective. But then again, the squad is good enough for a top 4 spot, I'd say.
What I think happened, a lot of these over expectation, or you know, the high expectation, should I say, we got to a Champions League final, be it we had some luck along the way, but that kind of maybe set that sort of tone as to that's the level that we should be achieving regularly. Now, to be in a Champions League final for our club was a historic moment. I went to the stadium to watch the game, and it was obviously very disappointing. And it almost seemed like the players had that sort of deflation as well. And even the whole club seemed to kind of, you know, that sort of expectation is, rightly or wrongly, is now within the DNA of our club. So we have now set that as our height, and we want to get back to those sort of levels. But it's going to be difficult without major investment. And whether Unic can provide that major investment is debatable. We're all probably waiting for some big Saudi owners to come in and spend billions, but whether that's going to happen in the near future, I'm not sure. Mike, did you want to say something before we move on?
I was just going to say, don't you think that's what the purpose of the stadium's there for, to provide that financial clout for us to compete on or with the likes of your Liverpools, your Man Uniteds, etc. I mean, take away Man City and PSG, because unless you've got Saudi or Russian owners, and you can count probably Chelsea in that bracket as well, but unless you've got Saudi or Russian owners, you're never going to be able to compete for against them, just because of the financial clout that they've got. But the stadium and what that can potentially bring to us from a financial perspective, I mean, surely the whole idea of that stadium being built is to put us on that map and provide us with those fees, whether it's transfer fees or wages, to put us on a map to compete. So
yeah, I do agree with that. I just think the actual, that sort of revenue is going to take time to generate, time to come in. That might be the problem for as Spurs fans. We're all very impatient. We want things now. Everybody wants things now. We're in a culture where it's a now culture. So people don't want to wait 5 years for that revenue to build up and come in 5, 10 years. We want to see these things happening. And as I said, that's kind of happened because of the Champions League, because of the Poch era, because we've now seen us finishing, as Stefan said, 3 times in a row in the top 3. And maybe if that hadn't have happened, we might not be in the position to think that we should be in those things now. I agree there's a lot of problems in the club, but, you know, it's a lot of things.
And then on the flip side of that, you could look at the players, because, I mean, I suppose this is a question to everyone, but do you think the players have been in the club too long, and that it's almost got to that point where it's all a little bit too stale? And do these players, okay, we know there's a few players in there that are just not good enough, without mentioning names, but is it a case that there's just too many players in the squad from the Poch days that just need to be moved on, not just for the sake of the club, but for the sake of their careers? They need a new challenge. Just do you know what I mean? A refresh is probably what we need as a club, as a team, as a squad.
there's a lot we could go on with this particular topic. We spent 20 minutes on that one already. And like I said, we could probably spend another 2 days on that if we wanted to.
Yeah.
But I'm going to move us on. Right. Okay. So the next one is, will Kane remain at Tottenham? And we've had a number of reports to suggest that Harry Kane, should we not make Champions League, is going to do one. That's the word on the streets. Just taking back to some of the comments that were said. This was last year when Harry Kane spoke with Sky Sports. I think it was a Jamie Redknapp interview that he had particularly. So you can see some of the comments there. It all depends on what happens as a team and how we progress as a team. So it's not a definite, I'm going to stay there forever, but it's not a no either. I love Spurs. I'll always love Spurs, but it's one of those things I've always said, if I don't feel we're progressing as a team or going in the right direction, then I'm not someone to just stay there for the sake of it. You can see some of the comments that Kane had actually said, and nothing recently. I know that the comments in The Athletic suggest that he said something recently, but I've not seen any direct quotes from him, apart from this, which was said last year. Darius, I'll start with you. Is Kane likely to want to go this summer?
I think there's a big difference between wanting to go and being able to go, because being able to go, I don't think he really has a chance of being able to go unless he really, really kicks up a fuss and throws his toys out the pram. And then even so, and even if he does that, there's not many clubs that are going to be able to afford him. I don't think Levy will ever sign or will ever negotiate with an English club unless it's ridiculous money. So I think that if we're going to sell him to even one of those Manchester clubs, we'd probably get enough money to make 2 teams. But again, I just don't think he can. I don't think he can. And I do feel sorry for him. I do feel for him, because as a player of his quality and his caliber, you do want to be playing in the Champions League. You do want to be competing for titles. You do want to be winning trophies. You do want to kind of have a legacy that you can kind of finish on and be proud of. But there's also things that Kane can do staying at Tottenham that he can do to basically cement a legacy as well. He can go for that Premier League record. He could go for the Tottenham all-time scoring record. There's things that he can do in Tottenham that can also keep him happy, I guess is the phrase to say. But I just don't know. I just don't see how he can get out of Tottenham. I really, really don't. He's contracted till 2024, I believe. He's on 200k a week. I think there was rumors about Poch contacting him about PSG, but again, I don't see that happening. So for me, it's more a case of Kane not being able to as opposed to Kane wanting to. I do think that he probably would want to leave if we don't win any trophies this season and finish out of the top 4. I think he definitely would want to leave, but I don't think he can. And I think he won't kick up a fuss either.
Stefan, do you think that we will still see Harry Kane in a Spurs shirt come season 21-22?
Yeah, I think just like us, he's stuck with Spurs, isn't he? No, I agree with Darius said. I think he probably will want to go this summer. I think he's given us probably 1 or 2 years more than a lot of players would have anyway. And I think the sad thing is with Kane is I honestly believe he wanted to stay and would have wanted to stay at Spurs his whole career and would have been happy his whole career at Spurs if he matched his ambition. But obviously these last couple of years, 2 successive years, probably outside the Champions League, it's not great for him. So I do think he probably will want to go, and I can envisage a situation where he might go and speak to Levy and ask to leave. But like Darius was saying, who's going to afford him? He's 28 soon. His ankle injuries haven't been exactly great, and there are other strikers on the market. So when you have got one of the big kind of major teams in the world going out there to spend 100+ million on a striker, you got Haaland, you got Mbappe as well. So I do think he's missed his chance. I do think he's going to end up staying, but I don't think he's the sort of player that will kick up a fuss. I think if he does stay, which I think is likely, I think he'll get his head down, and I think he'll then play for those records and try and create a legacy that and be our top goal scorer of all time and be the Premier League's top goal scorer of all time. So I think he'll be here, but sadly I don't think it's because he necessarily will want to be here. But I do think he'll give his all if he sticks around. I have no doubt about that.
So I'm going to play a bit of devil's advocate. If, let's say, he does want to go and the board says, okay, you can go, would you give the blessing for Kane to go? And what sort of money would you expect him to go for, Mike, if he was to be sold in the summer? I know I don't want him to go. Don't get me wrong. I'm just playing a bit of devil's advocate on this one.
That is the devil's advocate, mate. Okay. I don't want him to go. That's the problem. I mean, I don't blame him for wanting to go, but as a fan, I don't want us to lose any of our best assets. If, like you said, if we had no option and he was to go, I wouldn't let him go for anything less than 150. Because who in the market are we going to be able to get in? That's going to be able to put the goals in the back of the net, or the ball in the back of the net, as often as he does, and as consistently as he does season on season. I mean, again, you're going to be looking at any striker of top class, like of Kane's level, or anything near Kane's level, is going to be over 100 million. Which any of those sort of strikers are just going to be looking at us. Well, you've just got rid of Kane. Why am I going to want to go to Spurs? So. Yeah, I realistically 150 is probably what I would at minimum. If it was me, Levy, that's what I'd expect, nothing less. If I was a little bit coy with it, I'd probably try and price him out of the market, and I reckon 150 probably would price him out of that market, because like everyone's mentioned, he's got glass ankles now. He picks up an injury at least every season.
Let's advertise that. Let's keep advertising he's got glass ankles.
He's rubbish. He's rubbish.
He's rubbish.
Yeah, exactly.
He's rubbish. He's never going to fulfill his potential, is he? He's never going to fulfill it.
No, but yeah, I mean, I can see him. I think he'll personally stay. Just for those reasons, I just don't think especially when you've got Mbappe and Haaland on the market. Both, it's touted that they both want to or could be in the market for a move, etc. They're younger.
Well, I was just going to say, just speaking of the Mbappe sort of PSG sort of thing, Daniel, I'll come to you just on this last point about Kane. Do you think that potentially Poch maybe, having it's probably no secret that he still has a relationship with Harry Kane. Is there any sort of conversations that may be going? Because potentially PSG are the sort of club that have that sort of finance that could come up with the 100 million, 150 million. Would it be, and I hate using the word, would he go with your blessing, but would you blame him if he went to someone like PSG?
I mean, it'd be hard to blame him. He's an ambitious bloke and he wants trophies. And let's be honest, he's not going to get it at Spurs. I mean, okay, maybe a League Cup if he's lucky, but highly unlikely. And he's going to aim higher than that anyway. So I wouldn't blame him if he did move. I'd obviously be incredibly sad about it, as we all would. But I think it's interesting you say that, because I think that is the most feasible move. Because if PSG do sell Mbappe, then they've got a space free there, and they've made loads of money from the sale too, so they could potentially fund the deal. I wouldn't be totally shocked if they went in there with a kind of 120, maybe 130 million bid. And then my biggest fear is that PSG, of all the teams that are being touted, the Man Uniteds, the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas, I don't think those are going to come up with any sort of money to buy him. City potentially, but I don't know if Pep Guardiola would want to invest that sort of money in a 28-year-old, given the fact that he's got someone like Sergio Aguero who's 32. So I would expect them to go for someone like Haaland. But PSG, the relationship with Poch, that I could see potentially happening.
But would Kane go and play in the French league? I just can't see it. It's a step down from the Premier League massively. Apart from the Champions League, he did.
I think it's the Champions League, isn't it? It's that allure of the Champions League.
I suppose that is the only lure is the Champions League, because the French football, I don't know.
Why don't we loan Kane to PSG for like a year? Let him win.
That is actually such a good point.
Let him win the league and maybe win the Champions League, and then come back and then he can
bring Poch as well.
Exactly what Coutinho did.
Yeah.
Oh, lads, I as I said, there's no way on earth that I want Harry Kane to leave Spurs. He is as proved this season, as proved over many seasons, but particularly this season, he's invaluable. Yat said he cannot be replaced with just one player. I think we have to get two players to replace Harry Kane, and that's going to be a major problem. And then who do you bring in? Who is going to come to Spurs of the same sort of level as Harry Kane in the market that's going to cost us £10 million? Because that's the sort of money that people are going to think, oh, we're going to get someone on the cheap. You're never going to get anybody on the cheap. You're not going to get that diamond in the rough for a little money. We're going to have to go and spend a lot of money to replace Harry Kane.
Who is there, though? Who realistically, who is there in that market for us to say, right, Kane, you can go, and we're going to bring in Who are we going to bring in? I just don't know anyone there.
I could see us going in, getting Vestergaard to replace Toby, Danny Ings to replace Harry Kane, and Jensen.
I was going to say
Southampton.
I was going to say Danny Ings. Danny Ings was what I was thinking was going to go.
Oh, come on!
I feel like, even though I think Danny Ings will get a few goals, I feel like just psychologically we would have to bring in a big name. Just to, you would have to not just to appease the fans, but to show that you mean business. Because if you sell Kane and bring in Ings, you might as well just say, right, here's the white flag. We're coming 10th next season, right? I don't.
Here's the championship.
Getting even more depressing as we talk about it. So I think we need to move on to the last topic today, because otherwise I'm going to start bursting into tears, and I don't want to do that live on camera. Right, last one today, gentlemen. So,
Cub
Scouts. This is what I've called them, the Cub Scouts, because they're not doing any good because of this. And this is what I want to bring up in terms of a bit of and I'll take off the last little banner so you can see. Steve Hitchens joined the club back in 2017, February. He had been a previous scout for us, I think back in 2011, but became chief scout in 2017. And as far as I can see, these are the deals that have been under his tenure. Whether or not he's been involved in every single one single-handedly, I'm still going to lump him in with all of them. So 17-18 season, Davinson Sanchez came in, Lucas Moura, Sergio Aurier, Fernando Llorente, Juan Foyth, Paulo Gazzaniga. You can see how much we spent on them players there. We missed out, obviously, 2 transfer windows. Then we go to 19-20. Our big spend then would be Tanguy Ndombele, who we spent 54 million. And then on to this season, where we've got Lo Celso, Reguilon, Matt Doherty, Højbjerg, Rodon, Vinicius, Joe Hart. Of all those players that we've now bought, there was quite a few of them that are not featuring anywhere close to the first team, and even if they aren't performing at a level that I would expect. Someone like Davinson Sanchez, who cost £40 million nearly back in 2017, which was a lot of money at the time, our club record, and is not performing at the level. Is there a case that our scouting system isn't quite working as it should be? And I say that just in respect, and I know Darius is a big advocate of Leicester, what they've gone out and done, how they've gone out and scouted, how they've brought in certain players, not spending hundreds of millions, but literally finding the gems that we all talk about wanting. Is there something in our scouting system, our scouting network, that needs to be addressed for us to progress as a club?
Well, you only have to look at 2017, 2018, the state of those transfers.
I'm going to come to you, Mike, first then. You take it away on that first bit.
I didn't. Well, we got. Was it Paul Mitchell?
Yeah, Paul Mitchell was before.
Why did we let him go?
He went to Leipzig. Did he go to Leipzig? I think.
Yeah. I think he went to Red Bull, or was he? Did he come from Red Bull? So there was
he
something
went to
about
RB. He went to RB Leipzig, and look what's happened now. Look at the players that they're bringing in. So
the state of those transfers. I mean,
that's what I said when I went.
I tell you what. I'm happy to put my neck out there. Just sack the guy. Just get rid of him. He is not fit for purpose.
He has his job anyway, doesn't he?
No.
How's he got the job? Is he our chief scout? Is he actually classed as a chief scout?
No.
He needs to
go.
Title.
He's chief scout.
On the Amazon documentary, they cut to him and he said, "I hate January." I was like, I want my chief scout to wake up on the 1st of January like Rocky, running up the stairs, up and down White Hart Lane. Like, come on, let's be having it.
I'd be comfortable that us 5 as a collective would do far better job than he has. In the 3 years that he's been there. I mean,
I think anybody who plays Football Manager could probably do a better job. To be honest.
And probably he's maybe using Football Manager to find some of these players. I think that's probably what's happening. Darius, just give me your thoughts on. Sorry, Mike, I'll come back to you in a minute. Darius, just give me your thoughts on the whole situation at Spurs with this recruiting. 4 years Steve Hitchens been there, and and as Mike said, there's a number of players on there which you think to yourself, Jedson Fernandez, what was happening with that? What happened?
He must have been drunk at the time we got him.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And you know what the thing is for me? I've been really thinking about this point a lot over the past few weeks. And I think with Tottenham, I think there's a bit of an identity crisis. I think Tottenham, the structure and the hierarchy, I don't think they know what sort of model they kind of want to deploy and see kind of come to fruition in Tottenham, because they want to sign these players who are kind of under this 20 million, 30 million mark, but they're not doing enough scouting. They're not kind of they're not developing a scouting network well enough to kind of source these gems and play them. And then at the same time, there's no sort of direct line into the starting 11 where you can trust, like maybe say an academy player can say, look, I can get into this 11, because Winks is like one of the only players really in that 11 who came from the academy, and Kane, obviously, he's the main one. So I just think the issue with Tottenham is they don't really know what they want. When you look at teams like Dortmund and Ajax, and I use these for examples, is they say to their players and the youth when they're going up to them and approaching to sign them, they're going to be like, we can guarantee you a spot in this team, or we can guarantee you a potential opportunity to get into this starting 11. And that alone gives these players confidence. Somebody like Jude Bellingham, who's only 17 years old, Haaland, who was only 19 or 18 when they joined Dortmund, they had Man United on their doors, and Man United probably said, we will probably play you this and that. But Dortmund they can prove to you that, look at all these players that we've had in the past who have come from the academy, who have come from young ages and got into this first team and then moved on. There's not really much to show in that Tottenham squad to say that. So I think that it's a bit of an identity issue. I don't think they really know the hierarchy. I don't think they know if they want to make these marquee signings like Tanguy and Ndombele, and you could even class Lo Celso because he's going to come to about 30-40 million, Reguilon, who are these known players, or if they want to, do you know what I mean, spend less, because Højbjerg obviously is a good signing. That looks like they actually took the time to think about what they needed for Jose.
Just system look at some of this money that's been spent in 1920. 27, and people say 27 million, it's not that much money. 27 million on Steven Bergwijn, 24 million on Ryan Sessegnon. Both those players, well, Steven Bergwijn isn't featuring much. Sessegnon's gone out on loan, maybe one for the future, but still, to spend that sort of money for a player that's not even had a chance to play in the first team. I know the Giovanni Lo Celso deal had to be done when we kind of triggered it in terms of having him on loan, and I think that's going to be a good deal going forward. But again, you look at some of the money that's been spent. Yeah.
Well, for me, those two ones don't really seem as bad. I think the Jack Clark one looks worse because you just know he's never going to get into this team. He's never going to get into this team. And I'm not trying to discredit his ability or anything, but he's got so many players ahead of him that he's got to fight through. There was no chance he was getting into this team. So to spend 10 million on somebody like that, it doesn't really make sense to me when we were kind of differing between that sort of range of money to sign these bigger players. That's the sort of thing that annoys me the most.
I think I think he has the ability to push for the first team. Not now, probably not next season either, but because he's still very young. But I think he's got them. And this is where like the academy is. I think we're starting to produce the players that we're expecting from the academy. But they just need those. They need a couple more seasons. But the recruitment. Yeah, that's
Danny. I'm going to come to you.
I'm speechless about that.
I'm going to come to both of you two at the bottom, but I'm going to go to Danny first. The money isn't really going to be floating around anywhere in the world, given the COVID situation we've had over the last year. So, given that fact, how are we going to get players in of a quality that's going to improve our first 11? Because ultimately, we have to improve the first 11. I don't want to see more squad-type players coming in who ain't going to challenge for places. I want to see players that come in that's going to say, right, that's my place now, and it's competition for places. How are we going to do that, given the situation of COVID?
I mean, we're going to have to sell, aren't we? I mean, there's a fair few players in that squad that haven't been good enough, especially this season. I mean, Steven Bergwijn, as you mentioned, I know it'd be a bit harsh to sell him already because, he hasn't been here that long, but I just haven't seen enough from him to think that he's going to turn into a top 4 quality player. So, the likes of him, maybe we could get sort of 20, 25 mil back from him potentially. You add in the likes of Aurier, who's only got 1 year left on his contract. Matt Doherty, I don't know about you guys, but I think he's absolute shite. I'd happily never see him in a Spurs ever again. What happened? I mean, he was so good at Wolves as well. I don't know what happened there.
Honestly,
right. I'm gonna throw in a little bit again. I'm gonna do my devil's advocate thing. If the manager were to be moved on, do you think some of these players may find some form? Would you suggest that someone like Steven Bergwijn, I don't know, because we don't know, we're not on the inside, may then become a player overnight if another manager comes in? So, Stefan, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, firstly, I was just going to say one thing. I don't want to stand up for Steve Hitchen quickly because his smile honestly haunts my dreams. Right? but I do think it is worth noting that I do think that like some of the players we supposedly have been in for, some of the players, when we were chasing Bruno Fernandes, we could all see that we were definitely kind of in for that deal. It seems we were in for Dybala, when we were in for Grealish. And I do think sometimes some players are put to Levy that I'm sure Hitchen is behind. He's behind some of the scouting and some of the decisions. It goes, right, I've found this player. But ultimately, he's not then given the money to see that transfer through. So I do think there are limitations, and I do think that if you look traditionally, just before him on slightly smaller kind of transfer fees, we were still buying in Nkudu, Fazio, Stambouli. I don't think this is a new issue. Basically, I think Darius made a good point that there's this inconsistency in our methods and how we do things. Different. We had Baldini at one point, Arneson, all these different types of ideas and types of kind of transfer strategies. And I do think that there are issues that are bigger than Steve Hitchen is basically what I was trying to say. But in regards to what you're saying about the players, I don't think Bergwijn was going to come good. I don't think I've seen enough from him. And the same with Matt Doherty as well. But I think anyone in this current system under this manager who has any attacking flair about them, I don't want to judge them under Jose Mourinho. I don't want to judge these players under a manager doesn't want the ball at the team's feet. We're playing with, I think after we took the lead against United, we had like 26% possession. I mean, what's a player like Bergwijn going to do? Actually, Bergwijn's not that bad off the ball, so it's a bad example. But a lot of these players, Tanguy and Ndombele is a prime example. He needs the ball at his feet. He's not a midfielder that's going to run around making tackles. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of players in that team I'm willing to reserve judgment on until I see them under an attacking manager who wants us to play possession-based football.
Okay. I was going to say something. We've got a number of players out on loan. Norwich, Oliver Skipp doing bits at Norwich. He's one of the players that is being touted to almost come straight into the first team, or at least challenge the likes of Højbjerg and Ndombele for a place in that midfield. You could look at some of the youngsters, Dane Scarlett's, the Alfie Whites, all those sort of players who potentially have a future at Spurs if they were to progress on the same sort of trajectories they are going. Are we looking towards our academy to try and get some players into this first? And if so, how are we going to do that? How are we going to integrate these players?
So it's actually quite funny you said that, because my point I was going to make was similar to that. I think that I'm going to be a little bit bullish. I think the academy has got good talent. We've got good talent in the academy, and we could bring quite a couple. Divine, I think the main standouts for me, Divine, Sirkin, and Scarlett. I think those three could probably get into the first team in the next 4 or 5 years. For me, also, and this goes back to the manager again, there are managers out there who are known for improving players, and certain players who you sign who aren't necessarily the finished product might need a manager who can put them into a system, who can coach them, who might actually know how to get the best out of them. And I'm using examples like Klopp, like Nagelsmann, who have got a track record of improving players and actually getting value out of them as well, and being able to sell them on and potentially kind of fooling the teams who buy them. Because I use Joe Linton as an example. Under Nagelsmann at Hoffenheim, he was pretty good as a second striker, and he looked really good because he was playing in a system that supported him. He went to Newcastle
against us as well, didn't he?
Obviously that's Tottenham, isn't it? But yeah, like I'm saying, he went to Newcastle, goes and plays for Steve Bruce, and it's like that system's not going to help Joe Linton, so he's going to look a lot worse. And obviously they spent 40 million, so it looks bad. But I'm just saying, like, a manager can also make players look better and improve players as well. And I think Stefan makes a point where I think the issue with Tottenham isn't necessarily the 11. I think the 11, if we're talking about, when I say squad, I think we've probably got the 5th best squad. But in terms of the 11's really, really, really good. We've got 2 of the best players in the world in that 11. We've got some of the best midfielders in the world, in my opinion, as well. So the problem with Tottenham is being able to kind of increase the talent on the bench and get them to perform as well. And you need a manager to kind of put your arm around the players and tell them that you still have a role and you still have a part to play in this team. And Jose's not that manager who's going to do that. I'm not going to say that Jose's a terrible manager in this. That's my opinion. Obviously, I don't think Jose's good enough as a manager for Spurs only, but also he's not a manager who's going to kind of rely on a team of 16. And we need that as Tottenham, because our 11 isn't going to do that, isn't going to get far enough in the seasons. And that's known throughout the season. Now, you see Man City have got a great team, a great 16, and they're doing all right. And Liverpool, again, look at them after 4 or 5 years. They've got a better 11 than us, and they've won titles. So at least they can say that they've won titles. But now they're feeling a drop-off because the dependence on those players has become so far that when they get injured and when you're trying to rely on another player on the bench, the quality drop off is there, and then also those players don't really feel trusted and don't really feel part of the team. So it's difficult. I feel like you have to include more of the bench and try and make that bench feel like they're part of the squad more, and that's just by playing them more in cup games, including them in the squad, things like that. Little things like that just will help, I think, in terms of the whole squad just generate a performance.
Mike, I was going to ask you that question. Do you think Steve Hitchen needs to go? Do we need another chief scout?
Yeah, I personally, I'd get rid of him. I'm not, for the first time, I've been, as I say, I've been quite on the fence, and I try to look at the positives in everything to do with Tottenham. But there's no excuses with regards to some of those signings. There's just no excuses for that. I mean, Paul Mitchell, I mean, he is regarded as one of the best sort of chief scouts in the world. Why did Tottenham let him go to
Well, there was
Leipzig?
one of the comments there that there was a comment that we had come in to suggest that he fell out with Daniel Levy, which isn't a surprise because Daniel Levy can fall out with people quite regularly, as the number of managers that we've had suggests. So maybe something happened. Maybe there was some disagreements in terms of the policy, the amounts of money to be spent, the target. I don't know, but we're only surmising here. But yeah, it appears that the relationship soured, and Steve Hitchen had worked at the club before and was brought back in.
But surely it's a case of Mitchell or Hitchen should be working alongside the manager, not so much.
Sorry, I was just about to say that. The thing is with that, look at Tottenham and look at the past 10 years in terms of a stylistic view and an identity on how we play football. If you look at Barcelona, they have an identity and they kind of buy managers to fit that identity. Tottenham, the managers and the way that they play football is differed so drastically from all the way back to like AVB. It went from like AVB to Tim Sherwood to Poch to then Mourinho to then I've got it all mixed up. You go from Poch to Mourinho, and that's crazy. And then if we sack Mourinho and then we sign another manager who potentially plays football similar to Poch, you think, what's the point in signing Mourinho? So I just think that there's no continuity in Tottenham, and there's nothing to follow on in case something like Poch happens, in case everything blows up. At least you bring in somebody else who kind of doesn't have to tear everything up and start again. You can kind of say, okay, I'm going to bring these ideas and they're similar to Poch and we're going to work on it, instead of Jose kind of just saying that to say it for the sake of it, because he was never going to carry on what Poch was doing. He was never.
Any further thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, Poch did like such an incredible job, and I know towards the end some of his results weren't so great, but for me that was a foundation to build upon. And Levy literally got in Mourinho and just steered the ship in completely the other direction, which I think was the worst thing he could have done. You know, it was such a cultural clash with what we've done before. But you're right, every manager is chalk and cheese. It goes from Ramos to Redknapp, so it literally just goes like authoritarian to like arm around the shoulder. Then it goes tactical coaches like AVB to like kind of like man managers like Poch, and there's no linearity to it. Like you said, at Barcelona, you can see that kind of that identity from the bottom up, from the youth systems up. There's a club identity, but here it's just throwing a dart at the wall and hoping.
And I think you're right in that sense, and that's where I think, because the identity of Spurs, I don't know what it is, and that's when you see the transfers, you don't know what it is. So the whole aspect shows me that there needs to be almost like not a complete ripping up, but look at what do you want to do as a club? What do we want to achieve on the playing field? Then you kind of, as Darius was saying, bring in the manager to do that. You then you work with that manager to maybe then develop the players around that. You have to also rely on a lot of your academy. We have got a really good academy. We are producing good players, and we're not seeing enough of them break through. It's difficult to break through. I know he's an academy player, but you look at someone like Mason Mount in recent times, given a chance by Frank Lampard, and look what's happened now. You know, so there are players, and I think Oliver Skip, I'm hoping that he could really go on and do something major for us when he does come back, because he will be coming back to Spurs, and I hope he's not going back out on loan.
It'd be daft if he does go back on loan. I mean, he's a direct replacement for Sissoko, isn't he? Get rid of Sissoko, bring Skip in. It's a no-brainer. To us fans, it's a no-brainer. But
no pressure on the lad, but he's going to have to come in and just sort everything out, basically, isn't he? That's what we need.
It's all up to him.
It's all on you, Skippy.
Guys, listen, it's been really good. I'm going to come down to you both, Danny and Stefan. Just gives the viewers at home where they can find you both. I'll come to you first, Danny. Give yourself a free plug.
So obviously we're from the Spurs Versus podcast, and that's basically weekly episodes go out on all the major podcast platforms, and the idea of the show is that each week we have an opposition fan come on, we discuss the game. Sometimes it gets quite fiery. The most recent episode of the Manchester United guy we had on, it was actually quite therapeutic because we shared very similar experiences of Mourinho. It was almost identical. It was quite scary. But yeah, if you want to go check that out, we're on Twitter. Just search Spurs Versus and you'll find us. And check it out.
That was a good episode. Good episode of you on there, Sam.
Oh yeah, that was all right as well. I enjoyed that. I really did. Has he stolen your thunder, Stefan? Have you got more to add to it?
No, he said pretty much everything. It's just funny. We came up with this idea of Spurs Versus having like, opposition fans. But over the course of the year, everyone's doing it now. Everyone's got opposition fans on their streaming podcast.
Started a trend.
But I'm on Twitter under my own name. But I'm a movie guy. I'm obviously a Spurs guy at heart. But I review films and that. So my Twitter is not as enjoyable. It's just me moaning about movies. If I'm not moaning about Spurs, I'm moaning about movies.
I was just about to say, Stefan, it's Marvel and Tottenham, my Twitter. Yeah. So yeah, that's basically I'm the same as well.
Fantastic. Well, you probably enjoy the movies more than you enjoy reviewing Tottenham at this moment in time. But dear. Anything coming out in the near future that I want to be looking out for? What are you suggesting?
Yeah, well, there's actually a film that came out yesterday on Amazon called The Sound of Metal, which has got Riz Ahmed in it, which is it's up for all the Oscars and stuff. And that's a really good movie about a drummer that loses his hearing. And that's really good. That's worth keeping an eye out for. But to be honest with you, there's not really a huge amount at the moment with the cinemas closed.
True.
Which is why I put so much emphasis on Spurs every week to try and, give me something to look forward to.
Darius is a big Marvel fan, and I'm going to go through all their Marvel movies. I'm probably going to do that in the near future now because sometimes it's very difficult to watch Spurs. So maybe watching a Marvel movie might change my mood somewhat. Gentlemen, thank you very, very, very much. It's been a fantastic show as always. Brilliant to have these guests. Danny, Stefan, brilliant to have you on. Mike, as always. Darius, as always. Take care and we'll see you. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Paxton Road TV. We want to get as many of you to watch us as possible. More shows coming up. We've got the preview show of the Everton game, which is going to be on Thursday, the game itself on Friday, and also a reaction show for that. And look out for us also next week for talking points. I don't know what the talking points will be. It's anything could be with Spurs. So let's just wait to see what the week's like. Gentlemen, we're out.